My name is Jeremy Devins, and this is the Quiet Mind Astrology podcast, where I talk about the sidereal Vedic astrology system every week here on the podcast with horoscopes and updates. And if you want to learn about astrology more in depth, my free live workshop is coming up on August 1st at quietmindastrology.com/free workshop. You can sign up for the Become Your Own Astrologer workshop. And part of learning astrology is knowing what you're learning about and some of the common mistakes people make when they're learning. So, what I want to share today is a little bit about the differences between the tropical and sidereal systems and knowing that there are people who practice and teach Vedic astrology, but they use a tropical system. So it's very important that when you're learning astrology, you know what you're learning and what system you're learning, and that it's coherent and cohesive and consistent. So you might think, well, I'm learning Vedic astrology. So all Vedic astrology is based on where the planets are in the sky at the moment. But au contraire, there are Vedic astrologers who use things like the dashas and the nakshatras, but they use a tropical system. So if you're watching the video, I'm just going to share my screen of a conversation I had, a little debate I had with another Vedic astrologer who I respect. And I just want to say, I recommend checking out Vic Dicaria's work, And he is somebody I've followed off and on over the years. But when I found out he was actually using a different zodiac, that made a big difference for me because now I understand that when he's pulling up charts, he's looking at different information than I am. So it's important to know whenever you're learning from somebody what system they're actually using. And why does he use a different system? And why do some astrologers use a different system? Well, he posted recently something about the system he uses, and I want to use it today to share on this episode just a bit about why I use the system I use and why some other people might use different systems and why that might be confusing, why it's very important to know. It makes a huge difference in now the interpretations that person's going to make versus if they're using a different system. And not saying any system is better or right, but that there is a system that I use that I find to be more accurate and resonant and true. And why do I use it? And why don't I use these other systems? That these other people, they've also been studying astrology for a long time. Why do they come to different conclusions? And why do they find different things? Well, let's hear what Vic said on his post on YouTube. He said, the main chart uses the zodiac without Ayanamsha, i.e. tropical. The D9 and others like it are subdivisions of that, calculated by the rules of the Phaldipika. The nakshatras are not calculated in reference to the zodiac, but in reference to the Yogatara stars, i.e. sidereal. So it's kind of a short post, right? It's a little bit like I've got to explain a little bit if you're newer to these words or concepts. Basically saying that the main chart that he uses a zodiac that is tropical, and that's not using an Ayanamsha. So the tropical zodiac is based on the seasons, right? So when we have the spring equinox in March, that's when Aries season starts. And if you follow any Western astrologers, you'll hear them talk about seasons like this. There's Aries season, there's Taurus season, and that actually makes a lot of sense in that system. And why are sometimes tropical astrologers very accurate too, even though they're using this different zodiac? Well, it's its own system. In the same way, tarot is a system, any sort of divination tool is a system that can be accurate as its own thing. So he uses that. He uses this system of the tropical zodiac, which is really locked in based on the season. So every year, no matter what, the spring equinox, that's when Aries is. No matter what, it's locked. The whole zodiac is locked to the seasons and the equinox and solstice. He says that's the tropical, and that's without using an Ayanamsha. Ayanamsha is what calculates the difference between those seasons and where the actual zodiac is today. So every 72 years, there's a 1 degree change. So it's now been over around 2,000 years since that tropical zodiac was established. So there is 72 years, or 2000 years divided by 72 is 24-degree difference now from where the zodiac actually is in observable space versus where it was 2000 years ago. So now the spring equinox is not exactly when Aries starts, but the spring equinox is happening while the sun is still in Pisces because it's a solar system. The tropical zodiac has really a lot to do with the sun as well, emphasizes the sun. So it's the sun is in Aries on the spring equinox, but that's now 24-degree difference from where it actually is in space, observable space. And if you want to see the observable space, you can look on the website stellariumweb.org and see any date in history, including your birthday, and see where the constellations are. Right. So if I want to see right now where Aries is in space, I can pull that up on Stellarium Web, and I'll see that Mars is just past it. Right. We talk about this in the transits on the podcast. From when I'm recording this, Mars moved into Taurus. So I can pull up Taurus and see that Mars and Jupiter and Uranus are all in there right now on Saturday, July 20th. Right. That's the sidereal system. That's also astronomy. That's like if you go outside tonight with a telescope, you'll see Mars in Taurus. You'll see Jupiter in Taurus with your own eyes. That's where it is. But the tropical system doesn't recognize that as true. It's saying that Mars is in, actually, I would say that Mars is in a sign forward in Gemini, right? So basically, all the sidereal system, all the Vedic sidereal system is almost always one sign back. 24 out of 30 degrees. Most of the time, it's going to be one sign back. So they're saying Jupiter is in Gemini right now. But if we look at the sky, Jupiter's in Taurus. Well, why do they say Jupiter's in Gemini? Well, because of the seasonal system of where Gemini would land in the sky, where Jupiter is in the sky, now overlaid with that system of where Gemini would be in the sky is where Jupiter is. Are you following this? Does it make sense? Because it doesn't. It's not what's actually happening with we see with our eyes. And I come from a yoga background. I got into astrology through yoga first, and yoga was about getting to the truth of what's real in my body. No medications, no drugs, no external substance, just what do I connect with when I am at my essence, at my core, connected to nature, eating organic food, only healthy living. What is true? What is the actual clear perception of eliminating ignorance? That's avidya is really a lot of the core essence of yoga is getting rid of ignorance and seeing things clearly and truly. And that's where I broke away from Western astrology because I would see all these websites say things like Jupiter's in Gemini, Jupiter's in Gemini, Jupiter's in Gemini. Okay, cool. What does that mean? Okay, it means this. Where is it going to be next year? And how can I see that? Or where was it last year? Where was it when I was born? How do I see that? And you can't without software because it's a calculation. So you've got to look at this sort of conceptual Gemini as a concept of where Gemini would be because of the seasons and where Jupiter would be in that placement of the seasons. And it's not true. It's not the truth. I couldn't follow that anymore. But as its own system, like tarot is a system where the Fool card relates to this other card and the Sun card and the Moon card. It's its own system. And you can be very accurate with it. People can be very accurate with Western astrology. So I'm not saying that it doesn't work. I'm just saying it's not showing us what is actually truly happening in the sky. So it would be like saying it's 5:24 p.m. where I am right now, and you were to come to me and say, actually, no, it's midnight where you are right now. And I would say, no, it's 5:24. And we can kind of track that if we just look where the sun is in the sky and the day of the year it is where the sun would be in the sky, it all lines up 524. And then somebody might come saying, no, it's midnight because it would have been midnight 2000 years ago. And if I line up all the timing of everything I'm calculating, it should be midnight. No, it's 524. So it just doesn't, it's not true. It's not true. And I want to find what's true, and I want to align my life with what's true and cut out anything that's not true as best I can. I'm human, I'm flawed, but doing my best to connect to what is in nature and true. So that's where I'm coming from. And that's just the first line of the sentence, my thoughts. And then he says the D9 and others like it are subdivisions of that chart that he's using, the tropical chart, calculated by rules from the Phaldipica. So the Phaldipica is one of the source texts of Jyotish, and there are a few of these. And what I like about Vic is he speaks Sanskrit. He knows how to read Sanskrit and go back to these old texts and interpret them. I recommend watching his videos on that. He's probably the best at this. Highly recommend it. Like, that stuff is not easy. And I come from the yoga background. I know all the asana names in Sanskrit, all the common ones, and I can break them down a little bit, like Eka Pada, 1 foot. But actually to read Sanskrit from a text, that's really impressive and very rare skill. And it's cool that he does this. And those things he does, those readings of these, they apply. Like, if you don't follow his system of the Tropical Zodiac, you can still follow his videos on this, and they're useful and valuable. So I'm super grateful he's done that. It's a great service to the astrology community. So the D9 and others, the divisional charts, D9 is your Navamsha. It's the chart that's based on your birth chart to get to like where you're evolving in this life. So he's saying the D9 is based on subdivisions of that chart, calculated by the rules from the Phaldipica. So yes, the D9 is a subdivision of your main chart, but you can't really do that from the tropical zodiac. So from the D9, you get to the sign, to the nakshatra, to the pada of that nakshatra, and that determines your D9 placement. Now, I've got a really cool little visualization of this I can show you. So if I open my Keynote app and show you something I share in my mentorship class, in the advanced mentorship. Let's see here. So basically, I'm going to show you a visualization of this concept. So what I'm looking at is a pretty fancy little graph, but this is how we get the D9 Navamsha placements. So this inner circle is the 12 signs of the zodiac. In the next circle are the 27 nakshatras. These are the smaller divisions of the sky based on the lunar cycle. So we've got the solar cycle, 12 months. We've got the lunar cycle of 27.3 or 0.6 days, roughly. And that gives us the 27 nakshatras. And within that are 4 padas, or feet. So 4 smaller sections of the sky to give us 108 possible placements of every graha, every planet in your chart. So you can't just have 12 possible signs. You can have 108 possible placements. And then from that, we get the D9. So basically, if you're born with your ascendant in Aries, in Ashwini, in the first pada, that would mean that now your ascendant in your D9 becomes Aries. But if you were born in the second pada, your ascendant in the D9 would be Taurus. And if you were born in the third pada, your ascendant in the D9 would be Gemini. And this continues through all of the 12 signs. So hopefully this is making sense. I know it's a pretty advanced concept here, but this is how we get the D9. So if I have let's say I have the planet Mars in Aries, and it could be in Ashwini, Bharani, or Kritika in Aries, because those are the smaller divisions of Aries. And that's based on the exact constellation of Aries. Or so if I have it, say it's in Aries, Mars in Aries and Barony in the first pada, now in my D9 chart, I'm going to have Mars in Leo, right? So this outer chart is determined by where the planets are in the main chart, and that determines your D9. Other divisional charts have different ways of calculating. This is just the D9, and this is basically saying the rules of the Phaldipica. This is part of that. So this is going to come into play in the next coming things here. So he's saying the nakshatras are not calculated in reference to the zodiac, but in reference to the Yogatara stars. So Yogatara is just a bright star that is either in a nakshatra or, excuse me, in a sign of the zodiac or near a sign of the zodiac. Now, again, to reference this, I'm going to need to show some advanced stuff from my even advanced mentorship program. But it's going to be relevant here and kind of necessary. So I'm going to find this, and I'm just going to focus on a couple of these here. So the nakshatra of Ashwini is part of Aries. You cannot separate Aries and Ashwini. Ashwini is a constellation, is a star in the constellation of Aries. He is saying the nakshatras are not calculated in reference to the zodiac, but in reference to the Yogatara stars. But the nakshatras and the Yogatara are totally in reference to the signs of the zodiac. But what he's saying, I think what he's saying, he doesn't say this later, but I think he's saying the zodiac is not Aries, Taurus, Gemini, the constellations. He's saying the zodiac is spring equinox to the summer solstice to the fall equinox to the winter solstice. Between those four things, we get, now we're going to call this Aries season, Taurus season, Gemini season. And why is it Aries? Why is it Taurus? Does that have anything to do with the constellations? Nobody explains that part. I'm going to ask him about that later and not get a response. So he says all this. This is his claim. We're starting here. He claims the main chart uses the zodiac without Ayanamsha, the tropical zodiac, which is based on the seasons. The D9 and others like it are subdivisions of that calculated by rules from an old text. And the nakshatras are not calculated in reference to the zodiac, but in reference to the Yogatara stars. And so that's where he's starting from. I respond, I appreciate your work, but I respectfully disagree with your conclusions about the zodiac. Here's the definition of zodiac. It's a belt of the heavens within about an 8-degree either side of the ecliptic, including all apparent positions of the sun, moon, and most familiar planets. It is divided into 12 equal divisions or signs: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. End quote. Right. So I'm pulling out the quote of what the zodiac is. Then I say, each Yogatara is within one of those constellations. I should have actually said within or near, because some of them are not actually in the constellation, but most of them are. For example, Regulus is in at 50 or 5 degrees 59 minutes of Leo in Magha Nakshatra. You cannot separate the zodiac from the nakshatras or the Yogataras. It's one thing. The quotes you've used about astrology being locked to the equinoxes and not constellations were written back when Aries was linked to the spring equinox about 2,000 years ago. How do you reconcile these things? I'm open to being corrected and only want to follow what is the most accurate and true path. All right, so hopefully that's pretty clear. I've clarified what is the definition of the zodiac. The zodiac, by definition, includes the signs, and the Yogatara, by definition, includes the nakshatras. The nakshatras, by definition, include the signs. You can't separate them. We're talking about one whole thing. We're just breaking it into pieces. He responds, You are arguing based on an arbitrary definition of the zodiac given by a non-expert. And your argument about Nakshatra Yoga Tara, I think he has a typo here, is based on translations. Originals do not define the Yogatara in reference to the zodiac. Please see the Surya Siddhanta. Please see his website, which I've read this website before. This is not the first time I've looked at comparing. I genuinely am open to what's true. Like if somebody has a better explanation, I will switch and follow the truth. So I've read this before, and everything I've read in there is pointing to those texts were written in a time when, yes, Aries did start with the spring equinox. So what he's saying, he references those and he says, and he's like, this old text says that the zodiac, it's 100% based on the spring equinox, and this is when Aries starts. But yeah, it was written when Aries was on the spring equinox. So it made sense. And it's close, right? We're still not entirely far away from that. So we're still like in this time where, there's that gray area. Now I respond, he said, you're arguing based on an arbitrary definition given by a non-expert. My response, that's the Oxford Dictionary definition of zodiac. What would your definition be? So he kind of backed himself into a corner there of like, pretty strong response, arbitrary definition by a non-expert. So I wanted to start the conversation from like, let's clearly define what the zodiac is. So I went to the Oxford Dictionary, and so I asked him, okay, what would your definition be? He does respond to this later. He says, actually, the definition is fine. I agree. I did not notice where the end quote was. The part you're adding to the Oxford Dictionary about the Yogataras and constellations is what's wrong. So he later responded to that, but I said more things before this, and he did not respond to anything else I'm going to say here. And I'm open to any astrologer. Anybody who wants to respond to this. I know there's other Vedic astrologers who use their own systems. So it's important to know when you're following people, like what system are they really following? Is it the same? And so like Ernst Wilhelm, Ryan Kay, they use different systems that they've come to the conclusion this is the way to calculate astrology. So it's important to know like they're not using the same sidereal system that I am, and most Vedic astrologies are. So keep that in mind. But I say, okay, what would your definition be if it's not the Oxford Dictionary? And then he said, actually, it's fine later. So he didn't really respond to that. And he says, and I say, that is correct. The Yogatara is not something defined by the zodiac. It just happens to be that each Yogatara is in or near a constellation of the zodiac and continues to move with the precession of the equinoxes. So just to make sure I'm understanding you, do you conclude that Regulus is a Yogatara? And do you conclude that Regulus is a star within the constellation of Leo in astronomy? If not, what is your conclusion? So I open this to any astrologer who finds something different. Respond to that. What do you conclude? How do you separate these things? And I said, yes, I've read your page before, but I'm reading it again and going further into the text you reference. And I did. I went back to his page. I started over. I reread it. I put it all into ChatGPT, tried to like get a different perspective. Okay, give me all the main points here. Tell me what he's saying. Make sure I'm not missing something here. And again, like I said, I think many of those texts were written in the time when the equinox and solstice did align with the zodiac. Some of them have very unclear dates and unclear authors. Some of them are ascribed to people who may have lived hundreds or thousands of years. It's unclear. Right? There's a lot of gray area when we get to old texts like this. So I say, yes, many of those were written in that time. And those texts have many truths, but they also have many inaccurate claims. For example, the Surya Siddhanta, the one that he said, go look at this, I did. And he says in that text, the Surya Siddhanta, has a lot of accurate things, but also it says the earth is stationary and the sun revolves around the earth. So I ask Vic, do you also believe that? Do you believe this earth is stationary and the sun revolves around the earth? And there's many more things. If you actually go and try to read this text, it's very dense and not fun to read at all. And I don't really recommend it. But if you want to get to the origins of this stuff, it's important. And to not give that all of your power, right? I talked about this month of July not being the month to give your power away, to like actually take your power back from anywhere you're giving it away. And I think the only thing, if you're going to give your power to something, it should be what you can observably see, what is true and unquestionable. You can look at the sky and see where the planets are. So I say, how do you reconcile that you can watch the sky right now and see Jupiter is in the astronomical constellation of Taurus, yet the tropical zodiac says Jupiter is in Gemini? Again, how do you reconcile that? And I think most people who follow this kind of logic will say, because the zodiac is not based on constellations, but seasons. So then my next question is, well, why do you use constellation names if it's not based on constellations? Why do you call it Aries if you're saying, oh, no, it's not really about Aries, the constellation, it's the Aries energy? Well, where did you get the name Aries? Why in history did we start using the name Aries? If you go back, it's because the constellation Aries. Why do you use the name Taurus? Why is it every one of these signs is based on a constellation? Not one of them is not based on a constellation of the zodiac. Is it just random? Right? Of course, it's the most obvious thing. It's because it came from the constellation Taurus and what Taurus represented and where it was 2000 years ago when this astrology sort of boom happened that is kind of the foundation of modern astrology, especially at the West. Of course, Vedic astrology is believed to go back much further, but there's definitely a lot of cross pollination between Western and Vedic around 2000 years ago, no question. And even using the names Aries, Taurus, that's not Vedic origin, right? That comes from Babylon and those astrologers. So there's a lot of cross pollination of that. And it would be ridiculous for me to deny that or like not acknowledge that. Of course, that comes from there. So it's just weird how Western astrology doesn't really acknowledge this. No, it's not because of the constellation. That's well, what is it then? And again, I welcome anybody to just steer me correctly here, answer this question. Why, if it's not based on the constellations, what is it based on? And then why do you keep using the constellations if it's not actually where the planet is? I think this is important stuff. So I ask him, and what am I looking at in the sky then, if not the planet Jupiter in the sign of Taurus? I think you need to have a logical conclusion to answer that if you're going to separate this, what you're using of the signs from what you can see with your own eyes. So again, all of that stuff I said, his whole response was just 2 lines. Okay, actually, I agree with the definition. That's fine. Of the zodiac. I didn't notice where you ended the quote. The part you're adding about Oxford definition, about the Yogatars and the constellations is wrong. So that was 4 days after my response. So I don't think he's going to respond after this. Now, 2 days ago, I said, I quoted the dictionary because by definition, the zodiac includes the 12 signs, and the 12 signs are not just randomly named Aries, Taurus, etc. They're named for constellations, and those constellations have moved since the text you reference were written. And those constellations contain or are proximal to all nakshatras and yogataras. So again, as I referenced in my advanced mentorship program, I show all this in more detail because this stuff is, we're talking about advanced stuff here. I mean, he's been doing astrology a long time. He's got a lot of deep research and valid stuff. So I'm not discrediting everything he does. I'm just saying I disagree on this conclusion. So, we see this Regulus is a Yogatara. It's in Magha Nakshatra, which is in Leo. You cannot separate those things. It's one thing. Right? If we want to find Regulus, we got to look for Leo. If we want to find Magha, we got to look for Leo. If we look in Leo, we find Magha. If we look in Magha, that's Regulus. Right? Can't separate it. And same with all these. Now, not all of them are actually in that sign. That's a deeper topic. I guess I'll just skip that. I won't go into all that right now. But basically, they're either in or near a constellation of the zodiac, in a nakshatra or near a nakshatra. So this Yogatara, this is the foundation of what he's saying here. The nakshatras are not calculated in reference to the zodiac, but in reference to the Yogatara, which is somewhat true. as they say in all these fact checkers now, like partially false or partially true. But you cannot separate where the Yogatara is from the zodiac. He is separating the zodiac. He's saying the zodiac is based on the seasons, but it also happens to use Aries, Taurus, Gemini. But don't mind that. Don't worry. It's not about the signs. It's about the seasons. It's like not logical. It's just not logical. So I'm saying, all this, those constellations are named because of where they are. You can see with your own eyes any night. Yes, the Tara is not defined by Aries, etc. It's defined by the stars, and those stars are in or near the zodiac. So please tell me what I'm getting wrong here, and please reply to my other questions. So I don't think he will. Maybe you'll hear this. I'm open to, we can talk about this on Zoom. We can record it. I'm open to this with anybody. I spent a lot of time last year looking at every possible refuting the sidereal zodiac and everyone's conclusions. Other people have different conclusions than Vic. And my whole thing is like, if I follow the system as I was taught from my mentor and this lineage and what has been used for thousands of years and passed down, and so many other Vedic astrologers using this particular way, that's what I use. And it's the Lahiriyaya Namsha, it's the nakshatras, the zodiac, all of this, and it works. And if I'm not finding accurate predictions, there's probably something I'm missing myself that is not working in the way I'm interpreting the system that has been passed down. Knowing that those old texts and things that we reference are very valid and useful, but they're also incorrect quite a bit. And they say things that are just way off, like you'll have this placement and you'll be beheaded, or you'll have this placement and you'll be a king. They're not literal all the time. Those are metaphorical, and they're using strong metaphors to help you remember the energy of the thing. Or sometimes they miss things. And I know this studying the Yoga Sutra and the Yoga Path. The Yoga Sutra has one line about asana, technically three, but really just Sthira Sukha Asana, one line about asana. But now yoga, the whole thing is based on asana. How did we get there? Right? There's a whole lot missing in these old texts that required a student-teacher relationship to unpack it. So if we just rely on old text and this book says this and that's the way it is and that's it, we're missing what we can observe with our own eyes and see, like, look outside, look with a telescope, you'll see for yourself. You don't need an app or software to do it. If you require a software to do astrology, you're actually not doing astronomy. And astronomy and astrology are the same thing in my perspective. Like, they're linked. Astronomy is the observable sky. Astrology is the interpretation of the observable sky. When you take away the observable sky and now you're just using calculations of what is potentially the observable sky, you are now making predictions based on potential theoretical concepts and not the observable sky, and you're not connected with what's happening now. And if we want to really connect with the seasons, we want to really connect with the observable environment, including nature, weather, and the astronomy in the moment. All right, so that's my whole take and perspective. I get passionate about this because, again, I looked at all the possible things that could refute this, and I have not found a good argument, right? And I'm open to it. You want to send me one? Send me one, Jeremy at quietmindastrology.com. You want to debate with me? Happy to talk about it. I am open to being wrong here. But I've looked at this so many times and keep coming back to the same conclusion. And maybe you have as well. Maybe this conversation, this topic was a little over some of your heads. Hopefully not. Hopefully you found it interesting. But I share it because as you're learning astrology, it's important to know, like, what you're learning is consistent and reliable. And I've known astrologers who are learning and they say, I'm not getting good predictions. I'm wrong here. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to try changing the system. And now I'm accurate. All right. Now I'm making good predictions. Right. I know somebody who did this and now created their own system. It's not Vic. I'm not talking about Vic. I don't know how he got to. Well, I know he read the old text and he wanted to find what is most authentic and true to the old text. I believe, if I'm understanding right, this is his conclusion. Read the old text, read the Sanskrit. Very impressive. Very cool. And found this conclusion. Actually, it says this. It's about the seasons, and the spring equinox, and Aries is here. And that's the conclusion he came to. But that has to ignore astronomy to get to that conclusion, which I think is the whole thing they were using when they wrote the text. They're looking at the sky, right? And that's what they were seeing. So you got to factor that in. Anyway, if someone else has a different conclusion and if they want to share that, I'm open to it. But if you need to like change the system to be able to make accurate predictions, I would argue the system might not be the issue, but your interpretations might be the issue. And that's where you got to go back to the basics. Like, what am I missing here that I'm not able to make accurate predictions in someone's chart? And that comes back to the foundation of interpreting signs, planets, houses, nakshatras, aspects, rulers, things like this. And if you want to do this with me, if you want to get into this foundational stuff, that's what we'll be doing at the Become Your Own Astrologer workshop. That's the foundation that leads to the more advanced stuff. Today was pretty advanced topics, really, but it's actually very simple. It's like, go to Stellarium Web and what do you see? Jupiter's in Taurus. You don't even need any fancy software. This is free. What do you see? And then what is Jupiter? It's a giant planet. It's the gas giant. It's huge. It protects us. It absorbs so much space junk and comets that would otherwise destroy the Earth by now. Jupiter's orbit pulls that in. Jupiter's moons, Jupiter takes the hit. It pulls it in, stays in Jupiter's orbit, protects the Earth. Jupiter is a protector. It's big, it's expansive, it's protective. Jupiter's in Taurus. What is Taurus? It's a bull. What is a bull? Strong, stable, stubborn, powerful. Right. So it's a time where we get this expansion, this protection around our stability, growth and our stability, etc. Right. We're just observing the sky with our own eyes. I'm using this app because it's daylight right now, but you can go out at night and watch it. Depending where things are, you might not see it in your part of the world, but you can see it, you can watch it, you can track it with your own eyes, just like the rishis did, the ancient seers who passed down astrology, Jyotish, the science of light, through all these years. And if you can't see it with your own eyes, and if actually you see it with your own eyes and you're telling me it's something else, it's like Jupiter's in Taurus right there. I can see it. And you're telling me Jupiter's in Gemini? No, it's not. But if you want to say Jupiter is in the energy of Gemini season and apply that, you can make some accurate predictions in that system in itself. So Western astrologers can be accurate. But it's like, why call it Gemini if it's not about Gemini? It's about a season, and it's about a seasonal energy that's accurate and it works, right? So anyway, you get the point. If you want to learn astrology based on the observable sky and what you can actually embody and experience from observing that, that's what I teach. And I don't change the system. I changed myself because I was way off when I started. I made very embarrassing predictions when I started. I I can tell you exactly what that moment felt like the first time I tried to give someone a reading, and the horror in their face at the things I said, how far off I was. And I just happened to have a very sensitive person who was like, what is he saying? You know, I was just so wrong. And I knew I needed to improve how I learned astrology so I could be accurate. It was not that astrology was wrong and I needed to change the whole system of astrology so I could be accurate. I needed to change how I was a student of astrology. And I feel, in my prideful opinion, I became one of the most diligent, vigilant, is that the right word? Vigilant, very dedicated student. I became a very dedicated student to astrology and did my best to try to learn as much as I could. And I think I've figured some things out and I've shortened the timeline for my students. And I've been doing this for many years now, helping people learn astrology. I think you can learn it way faster than it took me. Learning the actual observable sky and what's happening now and what these energies mean and how you can feel them and embody them because they are happening right now, just like breathing is happening right now. Just like in my yoga background, knowing what's happening in my body right now helps me know what to eat and when to sleep and when to go to the bathroom and knowing what food to eat next and what kind of choices to make. Astrology is the macro perspective of that, of what's happening in the sky and how that is affecting me here in the micro perspective. because it is all just affecting photons and gravity and energy around us. And it is observable how the moon affects the earth, very observable with the tides, how the sun affects the earth with the weather and the heat. How other things affect the earth is what we observe through astrology, which is not as validated by science yet, but it will be 100%. I have no doubt about this. Just the same way that these other bodies affect the earth, these outer bodies, these further things, we will feel that and observe that and be able to measure that over time. And we can feel it now through intuition, through studying and observing these things, because we do our best to be a clear channel, to remove ignorance, to be connected to what's true. That's what I teach. That's what I share. I'm passionate about it. And if you want some more of this passion, join the free workshop, quietmindastrology.com/free workshop. That's where you can sign up for the Become Your Own Astrologer workshop. And I'll be guiding you through the foundational bits, how you go on this path, the step-by-step path to learning this stuff and save you years of frustration and embarrassment and confusion and getting lost on different rabbit holes, getting lost in following people who follow completely different systems and you don't even realize it. So you're learning information that's like, oh, this is what Bruce Lee is like, and I get it now. But actually, you're looking at another person and they pull up Bruce Lee's chart and it's totally different. What's happening? Right? Why they're getting very different conclusions here. Now you're getting confused. So you got to know like what you're really looking at and why they're getting those conclusions and why you're getting the conclusions you do in reading astrology and why I do what I do. If you keep working with me, I share all my secrets. I got nothing to hide, but I try to do it in digestible pieces. And I think this episode might be a big chunk to digest for some beginners, but if you're more experienced, hopefully it all made sense. And if you want to go deeper with me, whether you're beginner or advanced, the free workshop is the next step. And if you want to go into the mentorship with me, that will be following this. So that's where I share the whole process, all my spreadsheets, all my notes. It's all there, everything I've figured out in all my years. And it's not even I figured it out. It's like I read all the text, I read all the books, I've done tons of readings, looked at thousands of charts, and come to these conclusions of reliable predictions. And that's the foundation of everything I share. So I love getting to share it. And I'm excited to get to share it on August 1st. So hope to see you there. And look forward to sharing more with you next time on the Quiet Mind Astrology podcast.